Hello, friends, and welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. My name is Scott Cowan, and I'm the host of the show. Each episode, I have a conversation with an interesting guest who is living in or from Washington State. These are casual conversations with real and interesting people. I think you're going to like the show. So let's jump right in with today's guest. All right, I'm sitting here today with Kate Evans, a professor of horticulture at WSU in Wenatchee. And we are sitting in a conference room on the campus here of the Tree Fruit Research and Extension Center. Kate, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. Today, our conversation is going to be about apples and probably the Cosmic Crisp. Okay. But before we go there, your accent? I can't tell. Is it East Wenatchee or Wenatchee?
Oh, I'd say maybe a little more East Wenatchee than Wenatchee.
Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I'm English.
I would have never
Could
guessed.
you tell?
I would never.
A lot of people say Australian, so it's like, oh, no, not again. No, I'm English.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And where in the UK is that? I always get confused. Is the UK the official term that we're supposed to use? England? I don't know.
You can use whatever you choose because if I was Scottish and you said England, then that would be not appropriate. But
Okay.
England, UK, Great Britain,
You're
all
okay.
fine. Yeah.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in a city called Sheffield, which is slap bang in the middle of England. It's a very industrial city, famous for its stainless steel production and the film The Full Monty.
Okay. And where did you go? Where did you go to school at?
I moved about 30 miles north to another industrial city called Leeds. And did a degree in plant biology and genetics, so a sort of double major. Always loved plants, and it was a sort of perfect fit for me.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to go back to your youth. Okay, so here in the U.S. we joke about, in the backyard we're playing, Cowboys and Indians or whatever. So when you were a little kid, what did you want to do?
I always knew that I wanted to do science.
Okay.
Always interested in science, always interested in biology. For a long time, it was, to become a doctor, right? That's what everybody did if you were interested in biology, if you were good in school and whatever. But kind of when I hit the point of thinking about going to college, I suddenly thought, I'm really squeamish. I'm not good at the sight of blood. This would not be a good fit for me. And then I thought, actually, I kind of prefer plants. So I moved in that direction.
You moved in that direction. Okay. And then as we're sitting here today, you're all about apples.
Mm-hmm.
So when did apples come into the equation?
Yeah, really good question. It was something that I had never expected to do. I mean, growing up where I grew up, very industrial, a fairly bleak climate because we're sort of up in the Pennines, which is the sort of the higher elevation region that runs north-south in the UK. No fruit production. But I moved to do a graduate degree, PhD in plant molecular biology. So I moved sort of further north to a city called Durham, very old university town, and enjoyed doing that. But it was very lab-based, very sort of, working with DNA and test tubes and all that kind of stuff. And I got my PhD, so there, got my doctorate, but it made me realize I didn't want a job where I worked in a lab all the time. It was just, it was too restrictive. I wanted to have an opportunity where I was outside a bit as well.
Okay.
And literally just saw a job advert for an apple and pear breeder. And I kind of figured, well, I'll apply because it sounds interesting. I knew nothing about apples and pears. I knew a little bit about plant breeding, but I knew quite a lot about plants from a genetics perspective, which is what fits into breeding.
Mm-hmm.
I applied, and bizarrely, they gave me the job. So it was a job in a a research institute that's called East Malling Research, or it's had various names over the years, but it is the sort of primary horticulture research institute in England, and is very famous for its apple research.
What was some of, for example, because if you haven't seen, my eyes are kind of cross-eyed and glazing over here because, wow, okay. But what were some, for example, like job duties? What, like your first year on the job, what were they having you do? Like what sort of tasks?
A lot of the jobs that I am still doing today.
Okay.
A lot of what you do as a plant breeder is we're making crosses, so we're pollinating, so making controlled crosses to collect seeds, growing those seeds up and evaluating that material. So whether that's evaluating it for a disease resistance or susceptibility, or insect resistance or susceptibility, and then ultimately, of course, when that plant, that tree has grown up and it's producing fruit, evaluating the fruit for quality, eating quality and storage quality.
So this takes a number of years. This isn't just a month-long project. This is a number of years. Okay. Did you ever work with pears? Just because you mentioned, okay. Yes. I in my UK job at East Malling, I also was breeding pears, the scion part, the fruiting part of the pear tree, but also the rootstocks for pears. So apple trees and pear trees are what we call composite plants. So each of them is made up of a sort of a fusion of two different varieties. So the rootstock, the bit that's in the ground and maybe about 6 inches above ground, that's one variety that was especially selected for its for its rooting and its vigor control and maybe a few other elements. And then the sort of the fruiting part, which is technically called the scion, and those are the dessert varieties that you know. I mean, in terms of all the variety names. Okay. So every tree that's out there in commercial production is a composite made of those two parts fused together. When you're fusing these two entities together, are there ones that don't work well? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. And with broad stroke, why wouldn't X work with Y? Just do you know that's still a big black box in terms of research? Okay. Yeah. But there's some, and I'm just making this up. A red delicious apple won't work with some other, insert made up name here. Certainly, okay. and it I mean it's an incompatibility is what it's called between the rootstock and the scion, and there are certain combinations that don't work that well just together. Don't work. Okay. Yeah. Well, we're still in the UK. Yes. I mean, it makes perfect sense. The UK to Wenatchee. I mean, it's a common. The flights here. No, frequent, right? How did you end up at? Well, was from the UK to Wenatchee. Was that a direct stop for you? Did you go from there to the Washington State University, or did you have any other stops before you ended up here at WSU? No, I came straight here. It was so I worked at East Malling in that breeding program for 16 years. So it was a relatively decent chunk of my career. Yes, doing genetic research as well as breeding. So, but all of that in apples and pears, and then I really wasn't looking to move. It was just, Wenatchee wasn't on your top 10 list. It really wasn't, and I actually went to a conference in Spain, a fruit breeding conference. We're internationally a fairly small community, in terms of tree fruit and apples and pears, we kind of know the other programs around the world, and you get to know the other breeders.
And I happened to be on the bus trip, as you do in the conference, sitting next to Gennaro Fazio, who is an apple rootstock breeder in the US. He's based in Cornell, Geneva, New York. And he said to me, "Hey, Kate, Bruce Barrett's retiring out of the WSU program. You should apply." And I went, well, yeah, maybe. And that kind of started me thinking, well, if I apply, there's a very strong probability that they will invite me for an interview because, at that point, I was pretty well experienced.
Right.
Well published and sort of known internationally, and I thought, wait, I've never been to Washington State, and it would be a great experience because if you work in apples, this is one of those places that you really should visit. And so I did. I applied for the job, and they invited me over, and rest is history.
The rest is history. So when you came over, did they have you go to Pullman, or did they have you come here to this campus?
Oh, I had it all. Believe me, it was the interview schedule that everybody would love to have. They flew me into Pullman, straight from England, and I think I had 2 nights in Pullman. I was then driven to Prosser because WSU has another research and extension center there, irrigated ag, and there's quite a tree fruit presence there. I think I had 1 or 2 nights there, and then they drove me here to Wenatchee. I had a couple of nights here as well, and then flew home from here. So it was a fairly intense process.
What time of year was this?
It was April.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Great.
So they scheduled this. I mean, they
did.
They manipulated
They
you. Let's
did.
just be honest.
They did. Best time of the year, yes.
Did they mention winter here to you?
They did mention winter, but winter's important for tree fruit. We need to have chill. If we don't have enough chill hours, we don't get fruit bud, and there are no apples.
I warned you we'd go off. So
Yes.
I have a question for you. My wife has been complaining that this year we didn't have fall. We still have leaves on the trees and all that. Unusual. It seems like an unusual seasonal change this year. Summer, smoke, winter is kind of how it felt. Is that an impact to this year's crop and potentially, or are apple trees, because we certainly have cold.
Yeah, I'm not. I have to hold my hand up. I'm not a physiologist,
Sure.
but from what I am aware, that fact shouldn't be impacting our sort of fruit bud and production.
It was just because the seasons have been a little off.
All of last year was a little weird.
Well, yeah. Well, yes. Okay. So you interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
You got to see the bustling towns of Pullman, Prosser, and Wenatchee.
Yep.
Did you ever go to Seattle?
Only the airport.
Just the airport.
Yes.
Okay. So you got to see the Eastern Washington.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Obviously, we're sitting here, so we know that we know how this turned out. How long did it take? If you interviewed in April, when did you move here?
October.
Okay, another good month to be here.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you work in apples, yes.
Yes. Okay. The Cosmic Crisp was under development at that time, and you took over the project.
Right.
That seems complicated.
Yes, I guess when you look at it from the outside, it does. I mean, I'd also stepped into a breeding program in the UK and taken over that one.
Oh, okay.
When you work in tree fruit breeding, it is a long-term deal. So it's really is beneficial to come in as a breeder to a program that's established because you're inheriting material at every stage, and you can make progress a little faster, obviously, than if you're starting from scratch. And this program at WSU was only started in 1994. Bruce Barrett started it from scratch. So, compared to other apple breeding programs across the states, it is quite young.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you kind of walk us through? So let me see. I'm grasping all this. So we're testing various rootstock with scions to ensure kind of compatibility, and you're trying to breed for a desired output, right? And my super layman's view of this was that this apple was, the desire was maybe to replace another well-known apple characteristics and offer some other advantages. One of them being it holds well.
Correct. Okay. It stores well.
Stores well. Yeah. Okay. So you're testing these things, and some of it you want to see the fruit and all that. So, and I didn't realize this, and I live a mile and a half from here. There's an orchard here. So were some of the tests actually conducted here?
So the way the breeding program works, and yeah, maybe it's better to sort of backtrack into that bit first. So every year we make new cross combinations. So that means that we are, as breeders, we're thinking about, okay, what do we want in a new variety, and which combination of two parents do we think would give us the best probability of getting what we want in a new variety? Okay, right. So then that's simple, just sexual reproduction in apple. It's just that we're controlling it because we're putting the pollen of the one parent that we want onto the flower of the other.
Right.
Okay, waiting for fruit, getting the seeds out, and each one of those seeds has the same two parents, but they're genetically different. So they've got a sort of mix of genes, a bit like the easiest way to think about it is if like humans, okay? You know, you look at a family, and in many families, you've got the same two parents,
right?
And you might have a handful of kids. Each of those kids is a result of those two parents, but they're different.
Great.
Right?
Right.
And so as breeders, what we do is we exploit those differences. We make lots and lots of seeds, plant them out, and patiently over, once they start to fruit, which might be 5 or 6 years down the line, then we select. And so breeding is all about using that mixing up of genes and then selecting, doing rounds of selection to find the best ones all the time. So we do a round of selection when the trees are about 8 years old, after we've looked at fruit for a few years. Then we propagate, make more copies of the best individuals, which we can do vegetatively. So we're taking a bud, sticking it onto a rootstock, making a new tree, and we can make replicate trees.
Right.
Then we do more evaluation on those. And we do another round as well. So all the time what we're doing is we start off with, say, in any one year, 10,000 seeds.
Right.
And we're over a period of about 15 to 18 years, we're reducing the number of individuals down, selecting the better ones, and doing more, increasing the number of replicates of each of those individuals, and doing more evaluation until we find the best individual that we can then make a decision on to release. So that's kind of what happened to the Cosmic Crisp apple.
Okay.
Where was that done?
Right.
Which was back to your original question.
Yes. No. This is amazing. This is great.
The seedling, the original seed was germinated here at the center in Wenatchee, in the greenhouse. Okay. It then went to the nursery, got propagated up to make a tree, and was planted in we have 2 research orchards that are linked to this research and extension center. One of them is up towards a rondo. The other one is on the way to the Palisades.
Okay.
But it was planted along with that seedling was planted along with several thousand others in the orchard near a rondo.
All right. So, but that's one environmental area. Did you try, before going to market? Did you say anything in Prosser?
Yes.
So
yes. So as part of that, our first round of selection, when we've got our thousands of different individuals, we only have one tree of each individual. They're all different. That's one environment. That's the Arondo orchard. When we've made selections for our next round of testing, we plant in 3 different sites. We have one that is up high elevation site near Lake Chelan, one that's in Wenatchee, and then one that is down near Prosser. Yes.
So once you started that process, how long was it before it was released to growers? Like what's the timeline there?
So the original cross was made in 1997.
Okay.
That produced the seed that then was germinated in 98. First trees went out to growers in 2017, so it was a full 20 years. But at that point, in my opinion, I think we had more data about that particular new variety than pretty much any other new variety at that point of release. So it had been fairly well evaluated by sort of a whole load of different people, sort of independent views, not just my opinion.
Right.
Oh, hey, it's a great apple, you should plant it, independent views. We worked a lot with the Washington Tree Fruit Research Commission, who did some independent evaluation for us, and then put it out there, and it's just been fabulous, the amount of grower interest that we've had in terms of planting.
So one thing I read was that at first, I think it would be safe to say that demand outstripped capacity.
Absolutely, yes.
And you almost had, I don't want to call it a lottery, but kind of a
drawing.
A drawing.
Yes.
Okay. So that's interesting. So that was in 2017.
The drawing was prior to that to distribute those trees for 2017
So
planting.
in 2017, now this is maybe not your expertise, but I have a feeling you have information here far more than I do. So in 2017, the trees are begin to be distributed to the growers that have been chosen to grow this first version. I don't know, version's not the right word. Okay. And that's only Washington State.
Correct.
In the United States, it's only Washington State growers.
It is.
That's for how long?
It's a 10-year commitment at the moment. We hope that we will be able to continue to keep at Washington State in the U.S.
Really?
Certainly for a while longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is awesome for Washington State growers. That's very cool. So these trees are then taken to their various orchards that they're going to across the state. Did you have involvement personally from this point, because they're being planted, but they're not producing fruit right away? So what involvement, if any, did you have during that phase?
Oh yeah, good question. Not really that much, because once it's got to the point of release, the breeder and the breeding program, you're done, right? You've done your evaluation. You've chosen the one that you think is the best. You've provided then input in terms of lots of data on evaluation. I guess for me, it's been more about my involvement, about talking about the apple, discussing sort of and participating in discussions about naming and brand development and licensing and the sort of more commercial aspects. In terms of the research that has continued to go into producing Cosmic Crisp, that is really where my colleagues here and in one or two of the other places, other R&E centres, have really stepped up, because it's their expertise then that's needed. Sort of orchard and production systems, the best, the best rootstock to put it on, the best way to train a tree, what shape is a good way, how do you prune it to get good yield, how do you when to harvest it, how to store it,
Right.
to get the best quality fruit that you can. So, here we're lucky enough to have experts in all of that, and they've all participated and continue to participate.
So you were kind of at that point more in the marketing
right.
and okay. Here's a random question for you. Do you remember where you were when you saw the first Cosmic Crisp apple in the public, as far as like at a store?
Really good question. I think it was the Safeway in Wenatchee on 5th.
Okay. So what was that like?
It's just, it's incredible. I mean, just, I think I stood there and took a photo.
I bet you did.
And I'm still the person who, they probably hate me in that store, but they have a little stand, kind of post thing with a kind of poster on the top that is always by their apple section. And on one side, it has multiple pictures of multiple varieties and a few words about them. And on the other side, it's the Cosmic Crisp, big picture of Cosmic Crisp. And I'm always the person that turns it around so the Cosmic Crisp picture's out.
All right. I like that. Yeah, I can't imagine after working on the project for so long to then see it come to market.
It's a great, what I think drives all of us as breeders is to get your product out into the consumer's hands, know, and that is the wonderful thing. It's particularly, I think, when you work with a fresh fruit product, I mean, we win hands down, right? It's a healthy product. You want people to eat it. You want people to eat more of it. And eating more of it is helping your health, right? So
it's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
Okay.
It really is. Yeah, I've had wonderful conversations with consumers. I mean, I had a great interaction with somebody the first time I saw it in Costco.
Oh, okay.
And this lady was kind of standing there looking at the Cosmic Crisp and sort of debating about obviously whether to pick up that box of fruit or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I kind of said, have you tried that one yet? And she went, no, have you? So I said, yeah, I think you should have a go. It's a really, give it a go. It's nice and crisp and juicy. And she picked up this box and she put it in her cart. And I thought, yes.
I love it. So the apple's official name is WA38?
It is, yes. Why?
Why? What is?
Really.
I mean, I think I have an idea. May I speculate?
Absolutely.
WA for Washington. And this was the 38th variety of an apple that had been maybe patented?
Kind of.
Okay.
Well, Bruce and I...
Did I at least get the WA right?
Well, kind of.
Oh, jeez.
Bruce and I kind of go backwards and forwards a little bit. Is it WA for Washington or is it WA for Washington apple? Right. So either.
Okay.
And we've never really... Okay, it's WA. That's fine.
All right, WA.
38 was because it was the 38th selection to move into the second phase in the breeding program. So no other reason.
All right. So is that within your community?
Yes.
It's WA38.
The tree and its patent name is WA38.
Okay.
Yeah.
To the consumer, we know it as the Cosmic Crisp.
Yes.
How did we come to that name?
Yeah, good question. We had so many attempts to name this apple and really got some interesting input from various different naming companies in Seattle. And it was a fascinating experience having the discussions, but we ended up not really being very impressed with the suggestions that they came up with. And so I have a fabulous colleague based in Pullman in the School of Food Science, Dr. Carolyn Ross, and she'd helped with apple tasting, sensory assessment, and various aspects like that. And she was willing to do some consumer focus groups for us about naming. I was like, oh, fabulous. And she ran several of these focus groups with a whole sort of different groups of consumers. She did Yakima, she did a couple in Seattle, various different places. And we obviously gave them some fruit, and she threw names or words around, and she got them to throw words around. And I was invited to a couple just as a sort of, fly on the wall. Really interesting. The sort of the cosmic element came from a lady fairly early on who said she was looking at the fruit, and all apples have what are called lenticels. They're like sort of pores in the skin. And on the Cosmic Crisp apple, they're sort of whiter than many, but also they show up quite well because the sort of the ready background just makes them sort of pop a little. And this lady said, "Oh, they remind me of stars in the cosmos." Okay. So then throwing around words, cosmic kind of came up.
Right.
It's a crisp apple. I mean, it is a super crisp apple. One thing that really stands out about that apple is its texture. And so it just, sort of throwing the words around, it fitted really nicely together, and there you go.
Now you're oversimplifying it. And the reason I say that is because I can imagine that the decision to name it was analyzed and sweated over by a team. So it wasn't just like, that's it, let's go and move on to the next part. So I'm going to guess that it was,
It took it had more discussion than maybe I've kind of alluded to, but those words came together fairly early on in this process, and we then of course had to think about, okay, well, cosmic has got various different sort of, there's the kind of 60s kind of right on cosmic sort of,
Right.
And then there's different ways to also think of the cosmos cosmic. We threw around sort of ideas, early ideas, I think, were of promotion material were sort of more along the Jetsons and that sort of, which didn't really fit all that well in my opinion, but then the sort of the artistic views that have come up with more of that sort of starry cosmos actually I think work really well, and I was just really pleased with the final product in terms of how it came out.
When you released the name, did the growers have anything to say about it? Did they care?
They care. Yes, they absolutely care. But and it's had very mixed responses, and it did with Bruce and myself as well. Neither of us were sort of, yes, Cosmic Crisp. It's taken a while to kind of grow on us, but we've had. I mean, ultimately, I would say we've had more positive responses to that name than negative, and people remember it. Which is ultimately what's
from
important.
A marketing standpoint.
Yes.
That's very important.
Yes.
It needs to be a memorable name.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Cosmic Crisp. Well, one thing I've read, and we unfortunately we're going to we're going to go backwards again. What were the two varieties of apples that were kind of
the parents?
The parents.
Yeah. The mother was Enterprise, which is an apple that's never really kind of made it commercially. It's an American apple. It comes from a program that was run by Purdue, Rutgers, and Illinois universities.
Okay.
Cosmic Crisp looks very much like its mother.
Okay.
And then Honeycrisp was the paternal parent, the pollen parent.
Okay.
Most people are aware of Honeycrisp now. That ultra crisp texture was what we were looking for.
What would have happened if we would have reversed it?
Good question. We don't know very much fundamentally about the maternal or paternal influence in terms of which way round you make that cross combination. And many times now when I'm making crosses, and I'm sure Bruce was the same, we'd do the crosses both directions. And because of the way that the genes are sought anyway, it's very difficult to really get in there and tease apart if there's a difference between the direction of the cross.
So Bruce was the originator here.
Yes.
What was he going for? What was the goal of this when he started?
Yeah, the goal ultimately is to get better fruit for the consumer, to have new improved varieties for Washington State production. So bear in mind that, here in Washington State, we're producing at least 60% of the US crop. Okay,
right.
So, major players in the country. But the varieties that were being grown in Washington State had not been selected for the climate that we're in, for the growing conditions of Washington State. They came from all over the world.
Okay.
So it made a lot of sense to have a program that was based here, where we were selecting varieties that were selected in our conditions, our environment.
Right.
So that was one element. It was apples that would grow well here, apples that are a good range of improved quality for consumers, because ultimately they're the point where the money comes into the chain.
Absolutely. Right.
And then also to produce varieties that would be available for Washington growers. So that's a sort of a slightly weird one, but most apple varieties, certainly in the 90s, which is when the breeding program started, and actually as we continue through to today, most varieties are released from the breeding program to the industry in a sort of controlled, exclusive license way to a limited number of growers, perhaps a particular warehouse or whatever. They have to pay up front to have that license.
Okay.
The view, Bruce's view at that point, and it still is out there today, is that there are growers out there who have never really had access to these exclusive licenses. They haven't been able to afford them. So therefore they have not had the opportunity to plant the new improved varieties. It makes a lot of sense. Washington State University, we're a land grant university. We're here to support the growers of the state, and so our varieties are out there and available for Washington State growers. So I think that is also partly why we had this big uptake and interest and demand for the Cosmic Crisp apple, because there were growers there who had not had the opportunity to have access to a new variety for a long time.
Okay. Yeah, because when I look at a grower's website, I see Granny Smith. They don't, XYZ Orchard doesn't own the name Granny Smith, so XYZ Orchard's Granny Smith to the consumer is the same as ABC Orchard. This is the way I look at it. I don't know, if I go to my local Safeway, I don't know which grower grew this apple. So I can see how it could benefit that they get a chance to invest in this new to the market fruit, hopefully capitalizing on interest and enthusiasm and all of that, versus competing for an not old, but a traditional, to me, a traditional apple name.
Right.
And I see other names I haven't heard of before that are interesting to me. Okay. Let's see. How do we want to do this? Where do I want to go here? So let me ask you this question. Then I'm going to ask you your opinion. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's your opinion. Are you pleased with the progress that the apple is making for the grower and all the way to the consumer?
Yes. I think it's a very, very difficult thing to launch an apple variety, a brand new apple variety, and to measure its success. How do you measure its success? That is, it's a challenge, right?
Well, I would think, what little I know, I would think one way is, does it sell at retail? Okay, that's one measure. But for the growers, is it a good tree to grow? Is it how is it to harvest? Is it pest resistant? All of these things. Because if it's finicky, even if it's a great product, it's harder for the grower. Okay. So overall, this tree has performed as anticipated on a scale that we're at now.
It is certainly a tree that takes some input from the growers. It is not the easiest tree to grow.
Okay.
However, what I would say is that we, I think as a university, as my expert colleagues have provided and continue to provide some fabulous guidance in terms of best practices for, how to plant it, where to plant it, what rootstock, how to prune it, how to manage it. That's because every tree is different. Every variety is different. They all have their little nuances, and when we look at varieties, for example, Granny Smith, as you mentioned that one, when you've had a variety that's been out there for an awful long time, so much is known about it.
Right.
When you put a new one out there and it's also planted in a different site with a different microclimate, there are always going to be things that appear that are sort of, oh, I've never seen that before.
Right.
Hey, well, what a surprise, But I think with the continued research and the continued support that we're providing, then, hopefully the growers are still pleased with it.
So one thing, when I think, well, I've changed what I think now, but when I moved over here to Wenatchee, when I thought of an apple tree, I thought of the old apple tree, big trunk, branches and overhanging, and and that's not a commercial apple tree anymore. They don't look like trees to me. They look like walls in some cases. And I've been learning there's reasons why we're doing this. It's more efficient. They fruit faster, correct? The Cosmic Crisp, from being planted to commercial viability, how long is that typically? What are we looking at?
You mean until,
like, if I owned an orchard and I planted in 2023 1,000 trees, how long would it be? Should I anticipate that I would be able to get a commercial volume of product? Is it like a 3-5 year window?
That's a really difficult question to answer. Usually by the second year, there'd be a reasonable crop on those trees.
Okay.
But it totally depends on how those trees have been managed in the orchard situation. You talked about a fruiting wall. It is actually called a fruiting wall. The sort of much more two-dimensional tree. There are a lot of benefits to that. It has a very even canopy, which means that the light interception through the canopy is very even, which means that you get much more consistent fruit.
Right, okay.
When you think of those big old trees that you mentioned, where you've got a very dense canopy, the fruit in the middle is going to be not getting anything like the sort of light that the fruit around the edges
Never
is.
thought of that. But it's obvious when you say it, but I never thought of that.
Right. And so you get a hugely variable fruit when you harvest. But you'll also get fruit sort of perhaps it'll be a slower, that would be a slower production system to actually get a sort of a reasonable commercial yield, because you'd be planting the trees much further apart than if you're planting in a fruiting wall. So that sort of high density planting, you would start to get a reasonable crop within sort of 2 to 3 years.
In 2 to 3 years. Okay, so it's a faster turnaround for the grower than the old school thing. A while ago, early on in the podcast, we had a conversation with a cider maker out of Chelan.
Right.
And he made a comment in passing. And I'm going to ask, I don't know that you'll know the answer, but I'm going to ask you the question. Approximately how many trees per acre are being planted? Because the number he told me, I think I understand that I'm asking you for one size fits all answer,
right.
But the number that he told me made my jaw drop. And so I'm just curious, and it doesn't have to be just the Cosmic Crisp, but in general, what would you say is a reasonable number to say per acre with this new fruit walls?
Yeah, I mean, again, there isn't a one size fits all, but 1,400 trees an acre.
That's staggering.
Very high density. There are different ways for growers to manage this, and there are systems now which you probably don't notice when you're in the orchard, but there are ways to have instead of a single tree just being literally just a sort of a column,
right,
with a few branches. There are ways to train that tree where you have two leaders, so two sort of main stems coming up from one trunk.
From one rootstock.
With then sort of fruiting branches on either side of it. And if you have a vigorous variety, you can do that. And obviously that will halve the number of trees that you need per acre. And you've got to think about it from a grower investment. They're paying per tree.
Oh, absolutely.
No. So to put in 1,400 trees an acre, it's a big investment for a grower.
Yeah, no, but I was shocked at that number.
Yeah.
The number, I think he said 1,000.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I just couldn't wrap my brain around it at first. I mean, 1,400's even larger, but as I drive around, as you drive around and you see orchards, you kind of, if you pay attention, you go, oh, really? But that's amazing. I mean, and you're right. 1,400 trees, added up, plus the land cost, the labor cost, all these things impact growers directly. Okay.
I think, labor, you can just kind of say it quick, but oh my goodness. I mean, it's the biggest impact that there is, and a lot of these new fruiting wall systems have been developed really to try to reduce labor costs. So there's sort of a lot of detailed tree training goes on, but harvest is the biggest issue.
Right.
We're still picking that fruit by hand. And so, if you have that nice fruiting wall system, you also can have a harvest platform going through the field.
Yep.
You can have people harvesting sort of not going up and down on ladders. They're safer. And they've got very easy reach fruit to just be able to harvest. And really that is one of the biggest dilemmas for the growers, how to get the fruit off the tree and into the warehouse.
Right. Okay. This project took 20 years.
Yeah.
He retired. You took over.
Yeah.
That's kind of a signature career move. I mean, it's the signature of a career, isn't it? That you played this role in bringing this variety to marketplace.
Yes, I mean, I hope I've released other varieties. I released varieties in the UK.
Okay.
I am expecting that there will be more varieties that come out from this program. It took 20 years from the seed to then have trees out for growers. But you have to kind of view this, and we always think about this as a breeding program. It's like a conveyor belt. So every year we're making new crosses. Every year we're making selections, and it sort of moves forward all the time. So
like a pipeline, if you will. Okay, pipeline.
Yeah.
What would you, I don't know, you may not answer this question. That's okay. What would you like to see happen in your career now?
Oh, well, I think for me, my aim has always been to put out sort of different opportunities for consumers of different flavor profiles, different texture profiles. That it's always, I think it's the thing that for me is the most interesting about working with Apple specifically, is that as consumers have such widely different preferences. If you work in blueberry, and my blueberry breeding colleagues will probably hate me for saying this, I mean, it's a blueberry, right? Consumers go buy a blueberry, and the blueberry is a blueberry. You probably don't know different variety names.
Are there?
Oh, yeah. Right. You look at apple.
Right.
And consumers are so used to the fact that, there are green ones, there are yellow ones, there are red ones, there are bicolored, there are different, there are crisp ones, there are firm ones, there are sweet ones, there are tart ones, right? And people have their different preferences. So how wonderful as a breeder to be able to address this plethora of different different preference combinations.
Right. Where do you fall? What's this is like asking who's your favorite child, but from a profile standpoint, what do you like in an apple?
Yeah, that is a really difficult question for me to answer because my stockpile answer is I will usually say, oh, it's going to be the next release.
Okay, fair enough. Well played. Well played. So that's an interesting. Okay, so you get to sample all these. How many apples do you eat not necessarily eat, but how many apples are you sampling annually?
Oh, annually. I was going to say, well, this morning I sampled 63.
What?
Tomorrow we have at least that many to go through in the lab.
Okay, so
weekly.
So how does one sample 63 apples in a morning? Walk us through. That's okay. I used to work at Starbucks, and we would cup coffee, and you'd sip it and spit it out. You could go through a lot. You're not like drinking. Although I always was disappointed we didn't get to drink all that coffee, but that's how they test that. But how does one test 63 apples?
Yeah, we have them out in the lab. My team and myself will just go through independently, and we all have our little spit pot or large spit pot in some cases, and you taste, and we have a sort of little rating
you're not
thing.
Taking a bite out of an apple, handing it to your colleagues. So how are the apples?
No, not anymore.
Not anymore.
No, post COVID. I mean, we used to not to hand it. I mean, we would have 5 apples of each selection out there, and you kind of just bite in a different place to your colleagues, kind of thing. Post COVID, we're a little more careful, and we have a sort of protocol set up where we have. Still sort of 5 apples of each selection, but 2 of them we slice and put in little pots with a lid, and then we have a clean hand and a dirty hand, and you open the lid with the dirty hand, and you have a sort of skewer to take out your slice and close the thing up again. So and then taste the slice. So
are you taking notes with each?
Yeah, we actually went away from taking notes. We have a sort of like a electronic score sheet kind of thing, and we have a rating system set up for different appearance characteristics and taste characteristics, texture characteristics, and then a sort of an overall score and a comment section. So we all just rate on our individual tablets.
Walk me through an example. What, as best you can, you've skewered a slice of apple. You've tasted it. Walk me through maybe something from this morning that's maybe fresh in your mind. Because this is interesting to me. So what examples can you share that you're grading this for? Like appearance, you're looking at skin color and
right,
and for lack of a uniform look, if that's what we're going for.
Yeah, we obviously take images of them all, so we don't have to rate the appearance that accurately, but we rate on size and shape, color, so the amount of overcolor, so red or pink, and color of the background, the amount of russet, so the sort of brown rough skin finish, how prominent are the lenticels, the sort of pores on the surface. We rate whether there are any defects, and then we will rate from a taste perspective. We will rate firmness, crispness, and juiciness all separately because they're all quite different. And then tartness, sweetness, and aroma. Okay. And then we do a very simplistic kind of overall appearance, and then a overall eating quality, and a 1, 2, 3. Is it? 1's a reject, 2's look again, 3 is advance. Okay. And then comments, just free comments.
And so you tested 63 apples today.
Yes.
How long did that take? I mean,
it was, I was on some of those were on a reduced testing,
okay.
but it probably took a couple of hours.
And how many days a week or month are you doing tastings like this?
We, at the moment, will do around about 50 to 60 apples on a Wednesday and on a Thursday. And we'll do, so just those 2 days. We'll do that from...
You realize that works out to about 5,000 apples in a year.
I know, yeah, because we're not just harvesting. We do different pick dates. We have different sites, so we have samples from those. We have storage, so fruit that's been stored for 2 months and then sitting out in the lab for a week, just at room temperature to simulate sort of
home use.
Yeah,
right.
And then we also taste again after 4 months of storage and a week. And so some of those are a bit ropey.
So earlier, maybe before we hit rolling, you mentioned you had children.
Yes.
Do your kids like apples, or did you burn them out?
Good question. They don't, the ones that have left home have got more into eating apples, I think, than the ones that are at home. They were great for some of those nice sort of early publicity shots of, kids of young ages with a big apple in their mouth and a smile on their face.
Okay. Let me ask you, so typically, or I'll ask you this question. When you're not at work and breeding apples, what do you like to do for relaxation and fun in the area?
I love the theatre.
Okay.
And so I found that Wenatchee is just fabulous for the theatre, particularly musical theatre. So I try and go and see everything that I can at the theatre. And I sing. I sing with Columbia Chorale.
Okay.
So we do our sort of 3 concerts a year.
All right.
My other fun singing thing is I also try and do the Lake Chelan Bark Fest every year.
Okay.
And sing with the chorus. So.
All right. So I was waiting for you to say you're growing apples at home. No, I was kidding.
Definitely not.
Do you?
No.
So do you have any apple trees at home?
No.
No. They're like, that's too much.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I have 2 pluot trees.
Okay. All right. What's your favorite season here in the Wenatchee Valley?
Oh, really good question. I think it would have to be spring, which I think is most people's favorite time here. That for me, spring's a busy time for work because we're obviously dealing a lot with bloom. But it doesn't mean that I can't appreciate it. I think it's just a great time for weather and beautiful.
Well, that's interesting. All right, so that brings me in. So seasonally here with your job, what if we, from a high level overview, what are if we have 4 seasons here earlier, I was joking that we don't, but if we have, spring, summer, fall, and winter, what's your focus in each of those major seasons from a work perspective? Yeah,
spring is bloom, and so we're crossing. We're doing lots of pollination. So that can be fairly intense. Moving into summer actually for the breeding program is kind of the, if you like, the quieter time. It's mostly orchard maintenance. Late summer we start harvest, and I guess into fall. So we're very much focused on harvesting fruit and then starting evaluation of those fruit samples. We carry on doing evaluation all the way through, usually into February. So that's kind of into winter. And then we'll start, we start sort of late winter, early spring with planting new trees. So I guess that's our cycle.
That's kind of your cycle. All right. And here on this campus, how many people are involved in your program?
Really good question. I have three technicians, one graduate student at the moment and a research professor as well. Okay. So 5 plus me.
And are you teaching courses?
I teach in the spring. So this semester I co-teach a research orientation and presentation class.
And are those students here on this campus, or are you teaching them remote from Pullman, or? Yeah,
I teach. The Department of Horticulture is spread right across the state of Washington. So in this semester's class, I have 1 student in Pullman. I've got a couple in Mount Vernon, 3 here, 1 in Prosser. Sometimes we'll also have we have department members in Puyallup. And also Tri-Cities, so we can cover all of those. So okay. Yeah,
this could go on for a long time. So I'm going to ask you some stock questions. I always ask people about their communities. Now it's going to be interesting because you and I share the same community. Stereotypically, England likes tea, but are you a coffee drinker?
I'm a coffee drinker. I don't drink tea at all.
See, okay. Where do you go for coffee in the area?
I don't. I'm afraid. Yeah,
that's okay.
I tend to prefer a French or Italian roast.
Do you have a roaster that you're currently?
No.
No.
I'm in the process of trying. I sort of go on and off in terms of whether, my sort of European tastes for coffee are a little bit different to American coffee, and I struggle sometimes to find something that fits my palate.
So what's your, if I forced you to go out for a cup of coffee or coffee beverage, what would you order? Would you just order like a pour over coffee or black coffee, or are you going to order a latte?
No, I would usually go for an Americano.
Okay.
Black,
as it should be. Just okay. You say your European palate, so you like
dark, smooth.
Mm-hmm. And you haven't. So do you? Here you are tasting all these apples. Do you kind of take that scientific approach to other foods?
Rarely, not to the same kind of point, but yeah. I appreciate good ingredients in my food.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with coffee, you like a darker, smooth. So you're not a big fan of this light roasted.
No.
Kind of the contemporary thing that's going on in American coffee roasting. And that's okay. You're amongst friends. It's okay. All right. Another question I always ask my guests, and this is the easy version of the question. It's like, so where's a great place to grab lunch in Wenatchee?
Oh, I'm English, so India House.
I have never eaten at India House. So let me ask you this question, because you said you're English and you made this happy face about India House. How does India House compare to back home?
Oh,
and that might not be a fair comparison, but I'm just curious.
Well, it is a very difficult question because, it is, I think chicken tikka masala is the national dish of England now. So, we are very, very dedicated consumers of Indian cuisine. India House is really good.
Okay.
And I would recommend anybody to try their lunchtime buffet if you've not tried Indian food before. It's a great way to try it.
I just haven't tried that restaurant. Okay. Cosmic crisp apple. What does it pair well with?
Oh, many, many things. But as a coog,
this was not planned. It should have been thought through, but not planned.
Cougar Gold cheese. Apples and cheese are a fabulous combination.
Absolutely.
And we did actually for the I think it was Taste Wenatchee at Town Toyota, or I forget if that was the name of it, but it was mostly wine and ciders. But we did a Cosmic Crisp stand, and we had a slice of Cosmic Crisp apple, a little bit of Cougar Gold cheese, and a drizzle of some kind of honey over the top of it. But just the apple and the cheese combination is really good.
Okay. To your knowledge, is anybody making a cider with?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Two Towns cider out of Oregon. I think they're Corvallis based.
I believe that to be correct.
Very, very good.
Mhm.
And I think what is particularly nice, that the guy from Two Towns had a long conversation with me, actually, just kind of called me up out the blue and was asking me about the history of Cosmic Crisp because he was interested.
Mhm.
Has a pretty high sugar content Cosmic Crisp apple. It's sweet, but it's also tart, so you get sort of both of those when you eat it. But for cider making, that is a really good good balance. Sort of boosts the alcohol content,
Right.
and it's a very nice cider.
Once again, because you're English, but also because you're an apple breeder, are you a fan of ciders?
I don't particularly drink cider. Again, mostly I think because it's apple, and I mean, seriously, this is I think I've done 31 years of selecting in apple orchards, and so it's kind of put it like, I don't typically go to a restaurant and have apple pie for dessert, right?
Okay.
And so there are things that I would drink
Before.
as opposed to apple.
What would you
cider,
what
rather.
would you select over, like, if we're going out to dinner somewhere here in town and you were going to have a beverage with dinner, what would be your
Well, as a dark coffee lover, I also like dark beer.
Oh, pray tell.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of the stouts then? Or
Porters? Probably a little more than stouts, but yeah, I will sample many of them. I think we have some great local craft beers. And,
so currently, what comes to mind on that?
If I go sort of slightly beyond Wenatchee, I'm Irish Death.
Oh, really? Okay.
That tells you about my palate.
It does. That sums it up in 2 words. Oh my gosh. All right. Interesting. That's actually very cool. All right.
I like wine as well. I do. Yeah. I do
You
drink
do?
wine.
But so wine. Okay. So with your palate though, where's your palate for wine?
All over the place.
Okay.
Yeah. I really enjoy, some of these events that, the Chamber of Commerce puts on of the tastings. Absolutely great. I really enjoy those.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So chorale music.
Yep.
Do you get out? Do you do any of the hiking, skiing? Are you into any of that?
Don't ski. I tried it to start with, but the kids very quickly outpaced me, and it became okay. Well, so my husband and I would then either snowshoe or hike.
Okay.
Which we will still do. Yeah.
Yeah, which is great around here. Okay. What didn't I ask you that I should have?
Yeah, really good question. I don't know. My mind's blanking.
It's okay. Just want to make sure that we cover everything that's, and we could keep going on and on and on. All right. Now, I think I know the answer to this one because you kind of tipped your hand, but this is I stole that question from people too, but I also stole this question, and I think it's kind of fun. Cake or pie, and why?
Ooh, now that's a really tricky one. I actually really love to bake, but I would probably much prefer to bake cake than pie.
Okay, and what type of cake?
I'll try my hand at anything, but probably chocolate.
Somehow that seems appropriate after all these things. Okay, and then to wrap it up, if the listeners want to learn more about the Cosmic Crisp or WSU, where would you have people go? What would be a good resource for them?
There is a Cosmic Crisp website. I mean, if you just type in Cosmic Crisp, you'll find it.
Okay.
And also WSU Tree Fruit has got a lot of resources for tree fruit growers, but also for just people who are interested in anything tree fruit.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for making this happen.
You're very welcome. Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed the show. You can reach me on Twitter at ExploreWaState. I'd love to hear your comments. You can also visit our website at explorewashingtonstate.com. If you know anyone who would like the show, it'd be amazing if you'd share the show with them. This is the biggest way that we grow this show. Good old word of mouth. I'm glad you were here with me today, and I hope to have you listening to the next episode. See you then.